creepiest cut and unused content in gaming by C-Shift. Let's go.
Perfect.
Big fan of this guy's videos.
This is Ren and Stimpy, the
Hi,
critically
Ren
acclaimed and
and Stimpy.
simultaneously controversial animated series that left its mark on 90s kids for its crude, borderline obscene, and occasionally violent humor, as well as its unabashedly bizarre and wacky tone.
Do you have any rubber walrus protectors?
Call the police.
See, in the 90s, Nickelodeon
That's Maya. Call the police.
was chock full of shows that definitely straddled between providing eye-catching animation aimed at a younger audience, while also bestowing older viewers with enough adult humor to keep them entertained as well, but there was never quite a show on the network that broke that balance more than Ren and Stimpy. With its oddball sense of humor and unmatched level of adult-oriented themes and jokes, Ren and Stimpy would become one of the network's most beloved and downright absurd shows. Of course, Ren and Stimpy's popularity would gradually evolve in scope beyond just the confines of the television network, as it would eventually go on to have a surprisingly vast series of video game adaptations, with arguably the most popular example being Ren and Stimpy: Stimpy's Invention. Though the game wasn't exactly a critical darling, receiving fairly average reviews, fans of the series have cited this one in particular as the duo's best video game-related outing. It's weird, it's wacky, and it's peppered with puzzling visuals, but if those descriptors don't perfectly encapsulate what Ren and Stimpy's all about, then I don't know what does. However, over the years, players have uncovered a myriad of eerie, unused assets.
So I had never played any Ren and Stimpy games. Your older cousins watched all of them? Yeah, I grew up watching Real Monsters and Angry Beavers. I explicitly remember one of my core memories growing up was literally losing sleep because I recognized Daggett. I recognized his voice, but couldn't place it. And then like hours later, I was like, it's Invader Zim. Keep in mind, this was when I was like 9 through 13, like somewhere around there.
Tucked deep within the game's files, including one particular image that was never implemented into the final game, but still left users unsettled enough to leave a lingering effect on them. Deep in the game's files lies an ominous picture of Ren mindlessly staring deep into the titular machine, with his pupils non-existent and a background comprised of a nauseating shade of vomit green and a pattern consisting of hams, for some inexplicable reason. It's Ren and Stimpy, don't question it. It's a spine-chilling image that, to this day, remains a head-scratcher in regard to the context behind it. This is what I'm talking about today. Gaming's most disturbing pieces of unused or scrapped content. Enjoy!
Let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Silence of the Squirrel?
Whenever you think of Nintendo in a more contemporary context, what do you normally think of? You might generally think of the company's more family-oriented franchises and squeaky clean image. Well, the latter was somewhat true until the last couple of years, when the company's more litigious side was put on full display on account of their frivolous lawsuits. To all my Italian viewers watching, if you're named Mario and your favorite fruit happens to be a peach, I'd maybe skip the vacation to Japan. You might become a political prisoner in Nintendo's HQ, and be forced to play Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival till the day you fucking die. But back in the 90s and the 2000s,
Is that really so bad, though?
Nintendo, while still maintaining a child-friendly image, wasn't afraid to take gambles on some of their exclusive titles. I mean, the Wii, for example, was home to a multitude of adult-centric titles that utilized the capabilities of the motion
I heard that game, what was it called? Mad World, I think? I heard it was really good. But since it was only on the Wii, I never got it.
Trolls, such as Mad World, the criminally underrated and barbarically stylish hack-and-slash title that was a console exclusive to the Wii. And then there's No More Heroes, one of my all-time favorites, with a mechanic that required you to recharge your...
That was a clean brain buster. Let me see that again.
World, the criminally underrated and barbarically stylish hack-and-slash title that was a console exclusive to the Wii. And then there's No More Heroes, one of my all-time favorites, with a mechanic...
So, okay. So the difference between a suplex and a brainbuster is that a suplex, the opponent lands flat on their back. A brainbuster, the opponent lands on the back of their head, the top of their shoulders.
That requires you to recharge your weapon by performing a motion that I, on a personal level, am more than familiar with. Roll the footage. Okay, for the record, I was referring to unclogging my toilet. But perhaps one of
Yeah,
Nintendo's
okay.
biggest gambles came in the form of the cult classic Conker's Bad Fur Day. Conker's Bad Fur Day was easily one of Rare's most unique and wildly creative titles during their Renaissance era, when they were developing big-ticket console exclusives for the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64, respectively. What originally began life as another innocuous collectathon 3D platformer would eventually evolve into an obscenely vulgar and cartoonishly violent adventure hidden behind a veneer of innocence.
Oh no! I think I've had too much!
Think of it as the Happy Tree Friends of its era, but with notable additions, such as extensive pissing, a flower with massive dreams and ambitions, and a giant sentient piece of shit, and no, I'm not talking about Ganondorf and Brawl. However, despite its abundance of profanity-fueled dialogue, excessive violence, and sexual innuendos, not even Nintendo's mostly laissez-faire approach to the development of the game would allow for every idea to slip through the cracks. Case in point, the squirrel vivisection. See, towards the latter half of the game, Conker finds himself in the midst of a grueling war very reminiscent of Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan, more specifically the D-Day segment. It's morbidly hilarious, packed to the brim with over-the-top violence, and leaves me slack-jawed as I remember that this is the same development studio that gave us the fucking DK rap, but I digress. It's a fantastic and climactic section of the game that many fans recall as a major highlight. However, the devs wanted to push things just a smidgen further. You know, just to bestow the player with a little provocative imagery. Deep within the game's data is a cutscene that was originally intended to appear in this segment in some capacity, but was ultimately cut before the final release. In it, we see two teddy bear surgeons performing a live dissection, or perhaps the more medically appropriate term for all of my doctors in the audience, the
So Conker playthroughs win? I mean, that's on the table, man. I got to find a way to play it because I still don't have a 64, and I would rather play the 64 version than the Xbox version. But I mean, you know, we'll see because I heard the Xbox version was censored.
This one's for you, Charles. A vivisection on a squirrel soldier. It's already a relatively dark concept at face value, but you would think that the developers would find a way to make this a grim yet humorous situation with that trademarked Rare style of humor, but no, they went in the complete opposite end of the spectrum. They decided to fucking drown this scene in a thick, sludgy layer of tension and stomach-churning horror because the two bear surgeons decided that fiddling with a half-conscious squirrel's internal organs was mere child's play compared to their next pro-gamer move. Needless to say, this was quite a grotesque and unsettling scene, even in the grand scope of Conker's Bad Fur Day as a whole. Of course, Rare would eventually remove this scene at the behest of Nintendo, but it allegedly wasn't exclusively due to the stomach-churning violence, but more so because of its resemblance to real-life Nazi experiments that transpired during the events of the Holocaust. Regardless, this scene was never brought to fruition through traditional means, not even in the Xbox remake of the game as a grisly bonus feature or additional scene. Regardless, Conker's Bad Fur Day lives on as one of gaming's most unique and cherished 3D platformers of all time, and considering that it's been well over a decade since we've seen him in any official capacity, I'd say that it's about time for a comeback. But then again, Rare is owned by Microsoft now, and if you know anything about their current state of affairs, you know that modern-day Xbox and logical choices are quite antithetical to one another. At least we have the fond memories to look back on.
The Cuddly Killers,
Okay, so let's talk about a network
just like my ex.
that helped define the 90s and 2000s. I'm of course talking about Nickelodeon. What more do I really need to say about Nickelodeon? It's packed with acclaimed and ubiquitously recognized shows that any 90s or 2000s kid can immediately identify at even the most cursory of glances. Now, during these two respective decades, I would argue that Nickelodeon was operating at the
Nostalgia
apex of
chemicals.
popularity. So naturally, loads of merchandise and Nickelodeon-themed products would line the shelves of your local Walmart and get gobbled up by kids who worshipped that orange splat logo like an otherworldly deity. Of the many products that made their way into stores,
I was always more of a Cartoon Network kid, but I did like a lot of Nickelodeon shows.
it was the video games that I and many others remember the most fondly. And Nickelodeon was gradually becoming more aware of the crossover potential between the characters, which would lead to a myriad of titles that centered around the convergence of Nickelodeon's most iconic animated shows. There's Nicktoons Racing, an abundance of Flash games that were proudly featured on Nickelodeon's own website. Hell, they made a crossover within a crossover by combining Nicktoons and the fucking MLB. And the Nicktoons characters had faces stiffer than me after glancing at the Black Friday video game sales. Yes, I love a good deal, goddammit, can you blame me? The most iconic example, or should I say
Stiffer than me when I play Dead or Alive.
series of examples that predated Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 1 and 2 would come in the form of the Nicktoons Unite series, consisting of 4 games that retained a largely homogeneous action-adventure/platformer gameplay loop to one another. For little 7-year-old me, this shit was more hype-inducing than the Super Bowl. Everyone in 2008 was drooling over the trailers for Grand Theft Auto 4, and there I was with my PlayStation 2 controller firmly gripped in my hand, bouncing around the walls of my room with pure, unbridled, prepubescent joy when I heard they were making Glops of Doom. Now, the one that I remember playing the most was undoubtedly the 3rd game in the series, Attack of the Toybots, which many consider the best of the 4 games. As the name implies, it sees the Nicktoons characters crossing paths once again and taking on a militia of robots manufactured to resemble toys. It's nothing mechanically deep, as it's mostly attacking, jumping, and blasting at whatever's made of mechanical parts and hardwired to attack on sight. A Nickelodeon Souls-like, this game is not. But then again, none of these games were, and that's a-okay. I still enjoyed them. Now, since a bulk of this game takes place in a factory that's rampant with combative toys, you're more than likely going to be familiar with the most common.
Remember when Toonami merged with Cartoon Network to form Cartoon Network 2? Toonami merged? That's interesting. Like, Toonami was always on Cartoon Network, though.
Enemy in the game, the pink bear. It's like this game's equivalent of a raccoon. It's so fucking adorable until you get too close, and then your face ends up resembling a disgruntled butcher's cutting board. However, these bears harbor a shockingly dark secret that wouldn't be discovered until a multitude of years later. See, sometimes when you stumble across a specific area of a level, you'll find some of these boxes that can occasionally house the aforementioned pink bears. They'll line the walls, they'll be scattered into random corners of the map, and sometimes they'll just be sitting out in the open, minding their own business until you violently smash it for the sole reason of acquiring a few measly pieces of currency. I hope you're happy with your misdeeds. However, all of these boxes, regardless of the placement, have one thing in common. The back of said boxes are never revealed to the player. You'll get side shots, front shots, angled shots, but never back shots because this is a kid's game. At first, this could seem like mere coincidence, but as it turns out, this was all a deliberate attempt at concealing an unsettling message that the developers covertly snuck into the game. See, data miners were able to find the model of the pink bear box and, contrary to what they initially believed, discovered that the back of the box was completely modeled. However, they found an immensely disturbing message etched onto the back. Or should I say, series of messages. Take a look. Yeah. Holy shit. I don't know what kind of twisted, sadistic developer decided to tap into their deep-rooted childhood trauma and plaster it onto the back of a box found in a Nickelodeon game, but whoever you are, I hear therapy's not a bad option. I have no clue how this was able to slip past the higher-ups or any of the other members on the development team, but talk about leaving your mark. I mean, God. Everything about this just makes my skin crawl. The blunt, abrasive threads, the 18+ label on the side. And you want to know the worst part? This is technically in the final game, but because you're unable to freely turn the camera, and by extension take a peek behind the boxes, you're blissfully unaware of the horrific messages written on the back of the box, meaning that it's technically an unused asset. Shockingly, this isn't the only disturbing Nickelodeon-related unused secret, not by a long shot, and it's not the only one I'm going to be covering on this list. With the resurgence of Nickelodeon games making their way...
Which game is this? Attack of the Toys? Attack of the Toybots. Yeah, Attack of the Toybots. It looks like it'd be a PS3 game with the widescreen.
And the consoles, who knows? You might have already uncovered one when playing your favorite Nickelodeon game. Let that sink in.
Disgaea 2.
Okay,
I think
so
I might have
next I'm
heard
going
of
to be
this.
talking about a game that I know next to nothing about, aside from this one highly specific and disturbing scrapped alternate ending, so I'll just cut right to the chase. This is a game called Disgaea 2 Cursed Memories, the second entry in a game franchise with more titles than there are sophisticated Soulja Boy lyrics, which is exactly 1, 2, 3... Now in Disgaea 2, there are a multitude of endings that you can unlock, depending on whether or not you meet certain criteria or perform specific actions. In the case of Disgaea 2, the endings run the gamut from prophetic, in the scope of the series at least, to melancholy, to downright mental scar-inducing, with one ending in particular being so vile, so egregious, and so grueling to experience that it was actually completely removed from the game's international release. At the end of the game, you'll more than likely experience one of the game's two main endings, the good ending and the worse ending. Although it should be noted that there are a plethora
hear about
of
this
other
one.
endings that you can obtain, but these are the two primary ones. The good ending is about as wholesome as you can imagine. Adele, or Adel, slays the final boss, gets the girl of his dreams, and they both spend the rest of their days together in an epic yet ultimately heartwarming final conclusion until one of them dies of dysentery. But then there's the bad ending. In the bad ending, Adele, or Adel once again, successfully defeats the final boss, but in a morbid twist is brutally killed and then possessed by the final boss, which leads to him viciously murdering two kids, Taro and Hanako. Yeah, talk about polar opposites. It's like two politically opposed family members arguing about economics at a holiday family dinner. It's no fun for anyone
Oh,
else
that was
watching
fun.
unless you're itching for an excuse to bolt to your room and cry to the tune of Spirited Away for the fourth Thanksgiving in a row. This was already an appallingly gut-wrenching ending, which thankfully wasn't the canonical one, but the original Japanese release decided to crank things up a notch and make this go from White Album era Beatles to Iowa era Slipknot.
Yes. People equal shit.
If you play the Japanese version, the ending remains largely synonymous to the original, but with one cruel twist. After watching the credits for a while, you'll hear the petrified screams of the children as Adel, or Adele, doesn't just kill them, oh no. He goes full Hannibal Lecter and fucking devours them. And while it might sound comparatively tame when placed against the audio feats that more modern games are capable of producing, it's still horrendous beyond belief no matter which way you slice it. Naturally, this aspect of the ending was outright removed from the international release of the game, but to this day, the Japanese version specifically still contains the blood-curdling audio of what is undoubtedly child cannibalism. Dear God.
Good
All right,
times.
all of this sitting is getting me a little bit drowsy. Let me just stretch for a bit and... Oh God. Oh... Sorry about that, guys. I ended up tripping over my abundance of cords that are strewn about my apartment. And you know what? I'm starting to get sick of it. Thankfully, I can at least have a modicum of solace when it comes to my wireless earbuds.
We love
This video is
cannibalism.
sponsored by Raycon. Raycon's everyday earbuds have become a go-to gift for the holidays. They sound great, last all day, and then some. With 32 hours of battery life, and actually stay comfortable no matter how long you wear them. Over 4 million people already have a pair, so if you've been curious, now's the time to try them out. For Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you can get up to 30% off of all Raycon products. Perfect for gifting, or keeping for yourself. That's what I did. Personally, I love using these things while I'm doing my household chores or working out. In fact, they fit so seamlessly in my ears that I tend to forget that they're there in the first place. And in terms of audio quality, these bad boys are top notch. And they're extremely affordable compared to the competition. And if you're miraculously not satisfied with Raycon, they're offering a 30-day happiness guarantee, so there's quite literally nothing to lose. And if you're still somehow not convinced, check this out.
So I have a Raycon set of headphones. I actually like them. Yeah, I like them a lot. I don't like how my guitar sounds through them though. Like when I use them and just plug into my my Line 6. But on average, like listen to music, all that stuff sounds good.
Raycon's going big for Black Friday and Cyber Monday, like I mentioned earlier. Everything's going up to 30% off. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/cshift to save on Raycon audio products site-wide. Once again, that's buyraycon.com/cshift to get up to 30% off your order during Raycon's Black Friday and Cyber Monday sale. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring, and without further ado, let's get back to the video.
Oh yeah. By the way, Amelia, what did you mean when you said I think this is fake? Was that a like a joke, or did you think that like I was gonna pull a rib on you guys?
Alright, so I wanted to preface this segment by asking you this. Who likes Flash
Joke,
games?
gotcha.
Now that's what I'm talking about. Who doesn't love a good Flash game? Flash games were a massive component of most 2000s kids' childhoods, and for good reason. They're free to play, simple to grasp, and more often than not, a decent method of entertainment if you have roughly 20 minutes or so to spare.
So my favorite Flash game was Ex Mortis. It was a horror Flash game. It was really good. I liked it a lot. I think it's funny calling everything fake. That's true. That's very true. That's very true. I'm gonna start doing that.
Sounds harmless, right? Wrong. Flash games were like yin and yang. You had to have two radically divergent entities on the same plane in order to create a sense of harmony. For every Super Mario crossover, there's a scary maze game. For every Fireboy and Water Girl, there's that fucking black licorice clickamajig from Nickelodeon. Yes, you know the one I'm talking about. And for every Papa's Hot Doggeria, there's a Garfield Scary Scavenger Hunt. I'm not even fucking with you. Play that shit at 8:30 at night, and by the time you're done, I swear to God, you'll have trousers more soaked than mine after waking up from my first puberty-induced wet dream. Dear God, man, developers were fucking ruthless when it came to Flash games. Maybe it's because they weren't confined to certain rules and regulations, like with a traditional video game, but good God, man. I came here looking for Minnie's Cookie Kitchen. 3 hours pass, and next thing you know, my sleep paralysis demon starts bearing a resemblance to Goofy. Fucking Goofy. However, for all of the rug pull jump scares that Flash games maliciously pulled on kids, the most startling discoveries, at least for me, were the covert secrets that were originally intended to be left undiscovered. Case in point, SpongeBob Saves the Day. SpongeBob Saves the Day is an officially licensed
I know about this one. I think this is about that one really creepy set of eyes and teeth.
Flash game that feels like somewhat of an homage to the PC exclusive point-and-click adventure SpongeBob titles released during the early to mid-2000s. It's a fairly stock standard point-and-click title that can be absolutely steamrolled through in less than 30 minutes, and to be honest, that would have been the entirety of the game's legacy, or in this case, lack thereof. However, players would eventually discover two unused assets that would effectively breathe new life into this previously unremarkable title. Firstly, after scouring through the game's files, players had discovered that an unused image of Sandy's mangled and tattered sea suit would have been used in the final game in some capacity, but was scrapped. In fact, with a little bit of coding knowledge, it's entirely possible to integrate it back into the game, complete with dialogue and a description of its use case. Originally, it was supposed to be utilized in a puzzle where SpongeBob needs to seek out a water helmet, with this particular image indicating that he would need to look somewhere else. As to why it was seemingly cut at the 11th hour, nobody knows. But for me, I'd argue that it's because its existence had some pretty sinister and downright grim implications tied to it, although it could have been purely unintentional. This thing looks more akin to a fucking crime scene than a torn-up suit. And if you told me that this image stemmed from a tranquil lawn mowing session gone awry, I wouldn't blame you in the slightest. What's even more peculiar about this scene is that there's also an unused model of Sandy attending SpongeBob's party, with one massive distinction, that being her lack of a helmet. Obviously, this would be a bit of a logical blunder, as she's an anthropomorphic squirrel that cannot breathe underwater, but I digress. Maybe those teddy bear surgeons from earlier were modifying her lungs a bit and tossed in some gills, because she had decent health insurance, I don't fucking know. However, this discovery is comparatively tame compared to the other, much more infamous finding buried within the game's files, and I'm of course alluding to Yummer. Roughly a year after the game's initial release, data miners uncovered a sprite sheet with a grotesque image of what I can only describe as a revolting abomination that looks like the bastard child of Gollum, Jeff the Killer, and Voldemort. His hands in particular were
Makoto's Japanese VA voices Sandy? Makoto from BlazBlue? Because if so, that's perfect.
angled in a way to make it appear like he was peeking out from behind an object, which makes it look like his final pose before
That's
subsequently
perfect.
getting arrested for indecent exposure. When coding it back into the game, you can see that Yummer was initially planned to be located in the Krusty Krab, more specifically behind this wooden pillar. This was a truly horrifying yet simultaneously intriguing discovery for what was ostensibly nothing more than a harmless flash game for kids, but it made people wonder, who exactly was Yummer? For a while, fans had conjured up a litany of theories behind Yummer's harrowing yet peculiar existence. Some had theorized that he had a cryptic association with socks, which stemmed from his placement next to a handful of unused images of socks on the sprite chart. There was even a user who went so far as to fabricate a full-fledged creepypasta about Yummer, detailing a slew of disturbing
Yummers.
in-game events, which culminated in him coming face-to-face with the horrid creature in real life. It was a pseudo-viral sensation that absolutely took the gaming-centric side of the internet by storm, which led to curious players going so far as to email the developers of the game to satiate their own morbid curiosity. After a while, one of the developers eventually responded, and thankfully, the backstory behind Yummer's perplexing existence was actually far more humorous and lighthearted than you can ever imagine. See, it was revealed that Yummer was actually an in-house joke manufactured by the developers nearly a decade prior to the game's official 2019 release. Oh, and as a neat little bonus, the developers confirmed that he was actually named Yum instead of Yummer, but that's not going to stop me from referring him to his God-given name found on his digital birth certificate. As to why he was
Digital
found within
birth
the sprite
certificate.
sheet of a SpongeBob Flash game, well, the developer explained that Yummer was actually a common placeholder item that he and his colleagues used when developing games. Originally, the team was going to implement instances in which the likes of Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff would peek from behind corners and wooden pillars, and they would utilize Yummer as a stand-in before ultimately axing the idea while neglecting to remove Yummer from the sprite sheet, hence the result you see here. Despite this innocuous explanation
the
that
Yummer.
essentially deflated the notion that Yummers was intended to be this unholy monstrosity tucked away as a grim Easter egg, Yummer had effectively evolved into somewhat of a legend in the niche Flash game and Nickelodeon game community. Hell, he was even referred to verbatim in a cheeky cheeky remark by a developer that worked on Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl and stated that he was going to work on implementing Yummer into the game. Who knew that something so petrifying would have such a wholesome backstory?
Ensemble of terror.
Alright, look, you're watching a C-Shift video, so you knew damn well that there was probably going to be an obligatory Rockstar Games segment tossed in there somewhere. Rockstar Games is a company with games that are chock full of unused or completely scrapped content, some of which would end up getting them in hot water, or should I say hot coffee. The aforementioned scrapped or unused content tends to vary in scale. You have content as trivial as a few throwaway lines or an alternate texture for a weapon, and some that are as mind-boggling as an entirely explorable Mexico in Red Dead Redemption 2 before it was cut. And then there's Bully, packed to the brim with cut content so unabashedly disturbing that you'd be hard-pressed to believe that they were supposed to be in one of Rockstar's few T-rated entries.
Get them off me! They're everywhere! Ah!
That burns, doesn't it?
I'll take the lobotomy, thank you. However, the Rockstar game that I wanted to talk about is one that already lives in infamy as one of gaming's most controversial titles. I'm of course referring to Manhunt.
Fuck, we can't find the bastard.
Phantom Mexico.
Manhunt is Rockstar's closest equivalent to a full-fledged horror game, with a dark, brooding atmosphere, extremely tense stealth action gameplay, and my personal favorite, a mentally deranged lunatic with a motorized tool as a makeshift murder weapon. As if the severed head of a pig used as a mask wasn't enough for me to recognize that I made the right choice by wearing brown underwear. Throughout Manhunt, you'll find yourself tossed in the midst of utter turmoil, as you're forced to pick off enemies in obscenely gruesome fashion, all for the depraved satisfaction of a snuff film director. Thankfully, most of the guards exhibit just as much virtue as the aforementioned director, with such choice selections as skinheads, hyperviolent militants, and Roblox moderators. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what that means.
Man, no. I don't think you're a bad dude.
Oh no.
However, Manhunt had the potential of being even more gratuitously disturbing due to a handful of ideas that were either cut from the game or didn't make it past the conceptual phase in the first place. First and foremost, we have the Camheads, a planned group that was comparatively off-kilter and unorthodox when juxtaposed against the game's more gritty and realistic tone. These guys were initially a quartet of individuals with heads that were casually swapped out in favor of cameras, though
I feel like, wasn't Camheads like a creepypasta at some point?
it's unknown as to how integral they were to the game's story. In fact, their narrative impact is such a mystery that players have debated whether they were a group that you could encounter in the game or not. Some theorized that these were actually going to be the cameras that recorded James Earl Cash during his violent escape from Cursor City Prison. It's also a logical nightmare to think about. Are they humanoids, highly sophisticated robots, static figures made to capture footage with a dramatic flair, a manifestation of someone's twisted roleplay fantasy? Hey, just asking. Some have also theorized that the scrapped cam heads would loosely serve as a source of inspiration for the now iconic creepypasta known as camera heads, though this could also be nothing more than sheer coincidence. However, the cam heads would eventually see the light of day in the form of an Easter egg in Grand Theft Auto Online's arcade cabinets. But that's only scratching the surface, because next up we have a cut enemy by the name of Kenneth Jefferson, known colloquially as the Scarecrow. No, not that one. No, not that one either. Are you fucking kidding me? This is Scarecrow, a cut character from the game that's kind of like Scarecrow from Batman, except instead of fear toxin, he has an elaborate costume that allows him to embody the inner sadistic theater kid he always wanted to be. How wholesome. Now go read me a monologue from Hamlet while I throw tomatoes at you, you fucking jester. Originally, the Scarecrow was supposed to be a boss character that you would encounter at some point, but was, of course, removed for unknown reasons. In terms of his lore,
Drug slut. Like, I can see that being an edgy thing that, like, a woman might, like, paint on herself, but I feel like a man calling himself a drug slut is just, like, it's just very strange. Like, stranger than usual.
the Scarecrow was originally the head honcho of the Smileys, one of the aforementioned sleazy gangs that you clash with during the events of the game. However, after a catastrophic event put him in a negative light in the eyes of his followers, he was ostracized from his group and relegated to a homeless, mentally deranged tramp. Some fans believe that the Scarecrow would eventually evolve into the homeless man that the player escorts in a level during the game's development, as they both share relatively similar features and even act in a similar fashion to some extent, but this is easily disproven by the fact that both characters have distinct names from one another. Now, while there are some other cryptic classic pieces of scrapped content, the final one that I wanted to talk about is a cut group that never made it into the final game, although some remnants of its existence still remain: the Clowns. The Clowns were, as the namesake would suggest, a planned group comprised of members that don clown makeup. It's kind of their calling card. And it's kind of unsettling until they start rushing at you with mirrors duct taped to their foreheads. But then at that point, it's not
As you
scary,
do.
it just kind of becomes a bit personal. Originally, this group was intended as the final gang that the player would encounter in a scrapped segment that would take place in a museum, which of course only made it partially into the final
That guy's got
release.
some nice
More on
hair.
that a little later. See, the Clowns were very similar in nature to the Smileys, as they were going to be depicted as mentally ill thugs that fully embraced the killer clown image that has become quite synonymous with horror in pop culture. The individual designs would have ranged from wholly original to clearly inspired by some other entity. One of these examples is the 9th member, who dons a clown mask with a striking similarity to the esteemed and legendary comedian Oliver Hardy. However,
Oh,
the
yeah.
3rd member of the gang wore a clown
see it.
mask with an eerie resemblance to the notorious figure known as John Wayne Gacy. And if you don't know who that is, good. Just pretend I'm referring to that one Western guy and crawl back into that little rock you were hiding under. Trust me, you'll thank me later. However, the references to John Wayne Gacy didn't stop there, because the bio for the scrapped gang indicates that they were officially sponsored by a man known as James W. Gacy, which is about as blunt of a reference as you can get. That's like if I made a game where the main antagonist is a video game YouTuber with long-winded explanations and contrived comedy segments, and I named him C-Shift. Haha, funny. Who the fuck wrote this? That being said, the Clowns would still come to fruition, albeit in a more subtle capacity. In a prototype build of the game, you can find the model of a corpse with clothes akin to the ones that the Clowns were supposed to wear. And in GTA Online, the aforementioned Camhead's arcade cabinet also features a segment in which you clash with a gang aptly named the Clowns. And if you think it's just a coincidence, it's bolstered by the fact that the game is essentially one elaborate Manhunt reference. And of course, in the final game, you can still find the museum that was originally designed to house the Clowns, but of course, the inside remains inaccessible. Despite
Welcome
this
back,
abundance of
Alex.
scrapped content, Manhunt still remains a gritty and unflinchingly violent masterpiece to this very day, and has also garnered a relatively niche yet dedicated cult following that crosses their fingers at the prospect of another entry in the series. While the chances of a 3rd game are admittedly slim, there have been rumblings of Cursor City, the setting of Manhunt, being an explorable location in GTA 6, and only
Oh, that'd
time
be
will tell
cool.
whether or not we'll get another taste of the Manhunt universe
It's a shame GTA 6 will never come out. I'm sure we'll get Manhunt 3 before we get GTA 6.
in the hopefully near future. Babies. Who doesn't love a baby? I love babies, presidents love babies, Norman Reedus loves at least
I don't like babies. Babies are too fragile. I don't trust babies. Like, babies are the only things in existence that come out the womb looking for death. Like, they just try to kill themselves.
one baby. IGN loves dance party babies for the Wii.
It is a little something for everyone.
Hell, even musical artists love babies. Don't believe me? Listen to this.
Baby, lock the door and
Oh, fuck.
turn
Wait.
the light.
And when it comes to video games, even developers have a bit of fondness for babies. Well, most of them anyway, but we'll get into that in a little bit. For some
The only time I will care about a baby is if it's related. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, of course I'll love my baby. They somehow figured out what life is and try to swap servers. As God intended.
a truly inexplicable reason, however, babies seem to have been used in some of the most unsettling, shock-inducing ways in the
I know
contemporary
this one.
gaming landscape. Don't know what I'm talking about? Check this out. Remember the deformed, behemoth-sized fetus in Resident Evil 8? How about the wailing, blood-drenched baby in The Sink and PT? Hell, not even games that aren't rooted in horror weren't safe from this. Remember how I mentioned that in Red Dead Redemption 2 there was an entire sequestered section of the map that was ultimately scrapped before launch? Well, that's not the only canned concept, because an early draft suggested that the opening of the game would have seen Arthur's newborn child dying of frostbite. Yeah, puts a whole new meaning to "you're alright, boy,"
Fetus
doesn't it?
of
But those
God.
aforementioned grim depictions of babies pale in comparison to what is
fetus.
genuinely one of the most unnerving and blood-curdling pieces of scrapped content that I have ever had the displeasure of laying my eyes and ears upon. And wouldn't you know it, it comes from the Dark Souls series. Dark Souls is a series renowned for its grueling and unrelenting combat, but more astute fans of the series have praised the games for their very unorthodox methods of storytelling. Most times you're given a sword, a shield, and a handful of stat points to allocate to your character before before getting chucked out of the metaphorical nest and being told how to use your wings. And trust me, it's not just confined to the gameplay. You'll be bestowed with very subtle and cryptic bits of information about characters before gathering your newfound knowledge and reaching a mental epiphany before recontextualizing everything you knew about that one boss you faced 20 minutes ago. Like, remember Sif? What a fucking awesome boss fight. But then I read the lore, and now every time I face him in subsequent playthroughs, it's like I'm watching the opening to Up all over again.
No. Wait.
But in order to meet the character I'm referring to, we gotta fast forward to the third, and as of now, final entry in the Dark Souls series, Dark Souls 3. After slaying the Dancer of the Boreal Valley and gaining access to Lothric Castle, there's a chance that you'll stumble across an area known as the Consumed King's Garden, aptly named after the former ruler of the area, Osiris. Without divulging too much information, Osiris devolved from the overseeing monarch of Lothric to a sleazy, dragon-obsessed degenerate that was so hell-bent on preserving the posterity of his bloodline that he sacrificed just about everything else in the process, including his own sanity. By the time you reach him, he's a husk of his former self, emotionally writhing in agony and succumbing to his delusions as he desperately scrambles to search for his youngest son, Ocelot, who you can audibly hear due to his sporadic wailing throughout the boss fight. Yeah, pretty disheartening. Here, I'll show you a little bit.
Baby, lock the door.
Oh, goddammit. Upon reaching the second phase of the boss fight, Osiris smashes the ground in a fit of
I don't even know what that
before
is.
continuing the fight. However, this particular act was initially going to take a far more appalling and genuinely revolting turn, as data miners were able to uncover a character model resembling a young infant child that was to be placed in Osiris's hand, the same one that dramatically and repeatedly collided with the ground. If you just wanted to be a bit charitable and confidently presume that a game wouldn't showcase the ruthless and heinous act of murdering a baby, well, Merry Christmas. This game just gave you the gift that keeps on giving. No, it's not herpes, it's lingering trauma. Data miners uncovered audio that contained the chilling,
Why not both?
gut-wrenching noises of poor Ocelot getting used as a makeshift hammer.
My dear little Ocelot.
The audio of Ocelot's demise was, thankfully, removed from the game, and Osiris's animations and character model were both altered to remove any and all traces of Ocelot, and by extension, his unsightly death. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna take a gander at some more wholesome images, like those cute little puppy and kitten calendars that you can find at Walmart. But before I do that, C-Sim and I have been working on this extremely elaborate and professional 10-minute outro that I think you guys are gonna get a kick out of. Hell, I'll even watch it with you guys. C-Sim, get the popcorn, draw the blinds, and fire up that goddamn projector. We've got a newfangled outro to showcase. I'm gonna go get the calendars.
Another good C-Shift video.